right, let's start with a quick prayer here. Lord, we thank you for this time to gather, to get to worship you, and the chance to learn your word. We ask that you take the time to spend a little bit of time with each of our hearts and give us comfort and strength and guidance for today and for the week to come. And we give you all the glory and praise for all the blessings that you give us. Amen. There's a place where mercy reigns and never dies. There's a place where streams of grace flow deep and wide. And all the like a flood comes blowing down. At the cross, I surrender my life. I'm in awe of you. I'm in awe of you. Where your love ran red and my sins washed white, I owe all to you. I owe all to you, Jesus. There's a place where sin and shame are powerless, where my heart has peace with God and forgiveness, and all the love I've ever found comes like a flood, comes flowing down. At the cross, I surrender my life. I'm in awe of you. I'm in awe of you. Where your love ran red and my sins washed white, I owe all to you. I owe all to you. Here, my hope is found here on holy ground. Here I bow down. Here I bow down. Here arms open wide. Here you saved my life. Here I bow down. Here I bow. At the cross, I surrender my life. I'm in awe of you. I'm in awe of you. Where your love ran red and my sins washed white, I owe all to you. I owe all to you. At the cross, I surrender my life. I'm in awe of you. I'm in awe of you. Where your love ran red and my sins washed white, I owe all to you. I owe all to you. I owe all to you. I owe all to you, Jesus.
And thanks Josh for leading us in worship. So I'll quickly review the ones that we've been repeating for the folks online. So if you're a visitor, you have the scan code on the thing, and the green cards, which are also cards for prayer requests. Mentioned last time that we have, as a church, we have access to Paul David Tripp's video series, or one of his video series on marriage and parenting. So please contact one of the leadership team, the elders, or other members of the leadership team, if you have a question or you would like the access to that. And you can see the names on the program. So I'm one of the elders. Matt is here. John Iverson's out this week. Tammy and Alan Hogan. Tammy's here, and Alan's out this week. But if you have a question or you want access to that, please let us know. And then I think Heidi talked to everybody about that was interested about the Berlin partnership. Thanks. Or the Berlin trip over Thanksgiving to go assist with the Thanksgiving meal with the Picanados. If God works it all out with all the COVID and the travel restrictions going on. But please talk to Heidi if you're interested in that. Please be praying about it if you think God might be calling you to go on the trip or to donate to that trip, so that for the purposes of that mission trip. Let's see. We also, for those of you who don't know, we have a Bible study at 9 a.m. Sunday mornings before this service. Right now we're finishing up the Servant Songs of Isaiah, which is some key passages in Isaiah that prophecy about Jesus the Messiah. Really amazing stuff that God put in His Word for us to know. And then we also have prayer meeting at 5 p.m. on Sundays. I'm not sure that we'll be meeting this particular day though. So let's see, what else do I need to tell you? So we're in phase 2, which means we're still somewhat socially distanced. Masks are optional when we sing, but those of you who wear masks, they're very tasteful. Thank you for picking tasteful masks. And let's see. And we are having we'd ask you to please just linger a bit afterwards. We're going to be saying farewell to the ops. This is their last Sunday, so you guys know we're going to do that. We're going to okay. Well, now you do. But so please linger. We have virus-free cupcakes. So I know it's phase 2, so we made sure that they're virus-free, and then we made cupcakes. So you just kind of touch touch your cupcake. Because we don't want to have to sanitize them over again. So just touch the one that you're getting. So anyway, I think that's it for the announcements. Anybody else got anything? Okay. Are there any, just briefly, I don't want to take a lot of time, but are there any praises or prayer requests that maybe we can lift up? Okay. Well, we have one. We have some dear friends who, a couple that we know. Maybe you've met them. They've been here at church with us, but Brian and Constance. Brian passed away this past week unexpectedly. So they're like Ann and my age. So not old, but it was unexpected. So we're lifting up that family. A lot of things. They're believers. A lot of things you can imagine them to go through. And do we need to be lifting up Hudson, maybe? And okay. Well, let's.
For those who don't know Hudson.
Oh yeah, Hudson is Beth's dog. How would you describe like a he can detect diabetic service dog. Diabetic alert dog. So, and he's not feeling well. So, and that's he's important in Beth's life, the life of the Reeses, and maybe just for all that's going on in our country. So, let's pray. Dear Father, would you thank you for this opportunity to get together, for the gift of fellowship. Thank you for the ability to socially distance a bit in our church, and that we live in a country where we can meet freely. Thank you for the technology that allows us to look at things on YouTube or streaming later on, and that your word can go out. And we do pray that your word would be effective as you tell us it is. We lift up a couple prayer concerns. We lift up our friends, the Glover family, and who just lost their father and husband, Brian. we pray for them in their grief. We also lift up the Reeses and Beth and Hudson, and we ask that you would heal Hudson so he can be doing what you've amazingly designed him to do and had him trained to do. We ask that you be with us during this time of worship, and please help us to be equipped in the process as we hear your word and we spend time together so that we can be good instruments, effective instruments in your hand. In Jesus' name, amen. Oh, I'm sorry. I get this announcement soon. One more announcement. I totally forgot. And it's not on the program. It's sitting here, and it's sitting in a big sheet of paper, and I almost forgot to say it. Mark your calendars, June 27th. So that's a Saturday. Spark in the Park is scheduled in Bramble Park, and it's a gathering. It's a Christian community gathering, and I'm not sure if every year Access Ministry is the one that organizes it, but they're organizing it this year. So it's a time. It starts at 6 p.m. June 27th, Bramble Park, and Wellspring. I'm guessing that's a music group will lead in worship and praise throughout the evening. Be a chance for testimony and prayer to pray for towns, communities, counties, state, and the country, as well as for our government and our spiritual leaders. So please put that on your calendar. And if I have a phone number here from Dan, the phone number and email from Dan from Access Ministries if you want to find out more. So thanks.
You called me out upon the waters, the great unknown, where feet may fail. And there I find you in the mystery, in oceans deep, my faith will stand. And I will call upon your name. Keep my eyes above the waves. When oceans rise, my soul will rest in your embrace. For I am yours, and you mine. Your grace abounds in deepest waters. Your sovereign hand will be my guide. Where feet may fail, fear surrounds me. You've never failed, and you won't start now. I will call upon your name. Keep my eyes above the waves. When oceans rise, my soul will rest in your embrace. For I am yours, and you are mine. Spirit, lead me where my trust is without borders. Let me walk upon the waters, wherever you would call me. Take me deeper than my feet could ever wander, and my faith will be made stronger in the presence of my Savior. Spirit, lead me where my trust is without borders. Let me walk upon the waters wherever you would call me. Take me deeper than my feet could ever wander, and my faith will be made stronger in the presence of my Savior. Spirit, lead me where my trust is without borders, and we walk upon the waters wherever you would call me. Take me deeper than my feet could ever wander, and my faith will be made stronger in the presence of my Savior. And I will call upon your name. Keep my eyes above the waves. When oceans rise, my soul will rest in your embrace. I am yours, and you mine. Would you please stand for this one? You give life, you are love, you bring light to the darkness, you give hope, you restore every heart that is broken. Great are you, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise, we pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. You give life, you are love, you bring light to the darkness, you give hope, you restore every heart that is broken. Great are you, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise, we pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise, we pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. All the earth will shout your praise, our hearts will sing, these bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. All the earth will shout your praise, our hearts will cry, these bones will sing. Great are you, It's your breath in our lungs. So we pour out our praise. We pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs. So we pour out our praise to you only. It's your breath in our lungs. So we pour out our praise. We pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs. So we pour out our praise to you only. Woo! Thank you.
Once again this week, Rob Carlson is joining us from the Adventist Church. So we appreciate your coming and sharing the word with us. And we know it takes a lot of preparation and effort, so we really appreciate it. If you were here last week, or you watched online last week, I hope your appetite was whetted. It was excellent. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I was on the edge of my seat, taking notes with my iPad, which I do, and then. I just thought it was really neat how you brought out the fact that there's a big story and there's a little story, and the little story is what God is doing in each of our lives, and they're all part of the bigger story. And so, I ask you, thanks, Rob. So more on the Book of Esther.
Thank you very much. I appreciate being back here again and being able to spend this time with you. I appreciate more than that, and I want to express to you that I appreciate the kind words that I've received from so many of you. The welcome, being a foreigner and somebody who's not of your particular flock, your kindness and warmth and graciousness, generosity to me has been overwhelming. So thank you so much for that. I had been planning, and I mentioned this last week, I think it was mentioned, I was planning on being here 3 consecutive weeks. However, an opportunity came up, and I call it that because it is an opportunity, to take a little bit of vacation time with my family. My wife has been a nursing student for the last 2 years, and times when our schedules both potentially match up have been hard to find. And since that has come along, I talked with John Iverson about that and asked if that would be okay to back out on an appointment that I made, which I feel bad about because I don't like to back out on things, but he was very gracious to me, as I know that you guys all have been too, so thank you for that. So I hope you're ready for about an hour and 20 minutes. I'm going to just do it all, right? No, I won't. I'll just do the one. Before I get going, though, I'm resisting the urge to give maybe too many disclaimers today, or too many explanations. There's a lot of things I feel like I want to give disclaimers about before I go into it. One of the things is that I've been dealing with some stomach issues, and this morning has not been a good morning for me for that. And I don't know if it's just because of kind of the perpetual things that I've been having go on, or if it's specifically that I'm nervous about talking this morning. I don't typically get nervous speaking with people anymore. It's something that I lost the fear of a long time ago. But I am nervous about talking about Esther 4 today, because I feel like there is a lot of potential to be misunderstood, or to not have a constructive conversation happen. The text itself, as I was breaking it down and looking at stuff, I feel like it opens up a lot of possibility there for non-helpful conversation, at least in the ways that I was taking it and that the Spirit was speaking to me through it, which is how I write my sermons and what I do. I really try to, what God whispers in my ear, proclaim from the rooftops. And so as the Spirit is speaking stuff to me, I'm going over and thinking, okay, well, this is what you're telling me and this is what's hitting me. But then I get through it and I think to myself, boy, I know some people in my churches that I feel like might not understand what I'm trying to say or might be defensive against it. And those are people that I know. And so I don't know where anybody else is coming from, but I have a level of nervousness there because of that. And so with that, I just want to express to you that hopefully, I think you'll probably be a lot more understanding and patient with me than I tend to be with myself. And I'm asking for that graciousness today as I do the only thing I know how to do, which is to take the text that the Spirit has led me to and then faithfully go through it and share with you how it's spoken to my heart. And so I'll try to do my best there. But I do want to pray for the Spirit's help in doing that, that the gospel is lifted up and that I would be put down to the ground in place of Jesus being lifted up. So let's pray. Jesus, I want to thank you for how you have continued to lead me and disciple me and father me and befriend me. Forgive me and move me, and you just never fail. You never give up on me. I thank you for that, and I thank you for the many ways that you have shown me your goodness through other people. And I just pray, Jesus, now that your Spirit would be here with us and that you would speak and use this time how you would want it to be used. Thank you for this opportunity, and I just pray, God, that you would bless your people through me if you choose to, but in spite of me if you must. Just bless your people, God, today. Your name is my prayer in your name, Jesus. Amen. Okay, so last time, as a lot of people have graciously affirmed me on, was a bit more of a history lesson. And I'm glad that I wasn't the only one who enjoyed that, because I really do like getting in and looking at the big picture on stuff. Today is a lot more of what is maybe considered what I would call an exegetical sermon, just taking the text and getting into it and diving into a certain part of it. And we're going to be looking at Esther chapter 4 almost in its entirety exclusively today. So Esther chapter 4, I'm just going to start. I have some slides that are made. Last disclaimer, and then I promise I'll stop vlogging myself and we'll just let the passage speak. But the last disclaimer that I have is that this is the first time that I have presented this sermon, whereas the last one, it wasn't the first time. So this is the first time doing this, and in doing that, I write it, and then even this morning, I'm waking up thinking, man, I had to submit those slides 2 days ago, and there are things I would change. So if I change something, you're just going to have to let me change it, even though it looks different on the screen. Last disclaimer, I promise we'll go on. We're good now. Okay. When Mordecai, can you guys see this? This is good view? Okay. When Mordecai learned all that had been done, and by the way, this is out of the ESV, if anyone's curious for matching translations here. When Mordecai learned all that had been done, Mordecai tore his clothes and put on sackcloth and ashes and went out into the midst of the city, and he cried out with a loud and bitter cry. He went up to the entrance of the king's gate, for no one was allowed to enter the king's gate clothed in sackcloth. And in every province, wherever the king's command and his decree reached, there was great mourning among the Jews, with fasting and weeping and lamenting, and many of them lay in sackcloth and ashes. And the first note, if you're following along on the back of the piece of paper here, the first note, Mordecai's grief on that. Facing the pain is what I want to talk about the first part of this sermon today. Facing the pain. Mordecai's grief was disturbing. And if you read this and you're looking through, and I'm trying to visualize and picture this, from Esther's point of view, and from the people who lived in the city of Susa, this was something that was noticeable, it was loud. Mordecai went as far as he could go in the oriental custom of mourning, of covering yourself with ashes and wearing sackcloth and rendering your garments, which was a way that they used to express tremendous grief, like earth-shattering, life-upending grief. And then he went literally physically as far as he was allowed to go in that state to the king's gate. If he had gone any further, he was not allowed to do that, wearing the clothing that he was wearing. But to go to that place, this was not a grief that he was hiding or keeping to himself. He'd go to the same place where all this trouble kind of started with Haman getting upset at him for not bowing down to the same gate. He goes there and tears his clothes and is putting on this very, very visible form of grief. And it is noticeable. It's attention getting. And it's disturbing in a way. Like, it's hard to go through, or it'd be impossible to just go through and ignore the pain that's happening around here, which I think opens this story up and gets us into a perspective as we start of looking at this story as a lens through which how do we deal with and be there for people who are experiencing tremendous grief, life upheaval type levels of things. There are so many things going on that we could fingerprint and go on right now in the country and in the world. And because of these things compounding on top of each other even, it seems that the cry out is almost confusing and deafening of how much it's going on. And there's some things I think we have that we can learn of how to face pain. How to face pain, especially disturbing pain that comes up. And the text, I think, will help us. When Esther's young women and her eunuchs came and told her the queen was deeply distressed, she sent garments to clothe Mordecai so that he might take off his sackcloth, but he would not accept them. So we can get the next one to come here. Maybe I accidentally, no, I didn't turn it off. There we go. Is this the one with the accidental little thing we're not sure about in it? Okay, I think we're good here though. The first line there was Esther's grief was disturbing. The second one here, facing the pain. Esther's initial response was to deal with the symptom instead of the problem. That was the initial response that she had. Notice what she did. She sent different clothing, right? Mordecai is expressing his grief in this very physical way of having these garments and tearing them and putting on the sackcloth and ashes. Maybe there's even a logical reason that she wants to send him this clothing, because he cannot enter any further into the gate wearing sackcloth according to the customs of the Medes and Persians. And so he would be prevented from coming to talk to her further. So sending clothing may have been a way that she was trying to say, look, just put this on and then you can come in. But the problem was with the message that was communicated there. Mordecai could not do that, because for him to change the clothing would be for him to say that his grief was over. It didn't matter anymore. It was done. And so in a sense, she was giving him the message of just like, let's just deal with the outward look. Let's just deal with the problem as we are all experiencing it from you. Let's deal with the symptom of what's happening here, not necessarily dealing with the problem. And so I want to go on, and I have a little bit of a story I want to tell, but I want to just get the next one here. Then Esther called for Hathach, another one of the king's eunuchs, who had been appointed to attend her, and ordered him to go to Mordecai to learn what this was and why it was. And there is, I think, in this text, the best thing that Esther did in this process of facing pain in somebody else's life. She made an effort to understand. Mordecai responded in the negative to her gifting of clothing, to let's just deal with it that way. And so because of that, she made an effort to say, okay, I'm going to send someone to try to understand what this is and what's going on. And she made the effort to understand. She listened. Now, she couldn't physically go and listen in this case, but she made that effort. Now, here's where I want to share a story with you that has been one of the most helpful real-life stories that has happened in my life that I have learned from somebody else. I went to college in a town called Walla Walla, Washington. That's a real place, even though it's actually the place where Bugs Bunny's Acme products come from in the Bugs Bunny cartoons. Walla Walla, Washington is a real place, southeastern corner of Washington. And ever heard of Walla Walla sweet onions? Yes. It smells really bad in Walla Walla because the onions fill in. But they grow grapes now. I am really going off track here. Help me pull back. I went to school in Walla Walla, and when I had begun I began my college attempt as a social work major. And then after 6 months, I learned what social work was, and I changed majors. because I didn't know what it was going into it. I just picked something that sounded fun, I guess, I don't know. But I was connected with a teacher there who teaches in two different fields, both in the social work department, but also in the theology department. So after kind of my wanderings and exploring some different things, when I finally landed on studying theology, here was this professor that I had connected with in both places, and he ended up becoming my advisor, the person who was responsible for meeting with me and overlooking my whole plan and making sure that I was on track and doing the things that I needed to do. This man, who I don't, this story is out there, he's actually even written a book on it, and so this is not any secrets to hold back. His name is Daryl Bigger, and Daryl is what I would call him. Many other people would call him Admiral Bigger. He is he's retired now, a rear admiral in the Navy, which is high enough ranking that when he would go to board a ship, they would literally have to roll out the red carpet in front of him. Very high ranking, very respected, and then also taught in both of these departments at Walla Walla University. And so Daryl was someone that he's a very kind, very gentle, not a big, imposing presence, very soft-spoken, but the kind of person that just out of the respect of his life and accomplishments and who he is, I think people listen when we have the chance to be and listen to him. Well, he shared a story that at least at the time I'm sitting there as a student, it caught me off guard because I did not expect and I did not know this story. Apparently, before I became a student at the university there, he went through something that, in my opinion, is one of the most difficult grieving tragedies a person could probably go through. He had a daughter who had gone from Washington State across the country to New York, where she was taking her, I believe, working on her master's degree. And through circumstances, details that I don't need to know or go into there, she was both raped and murdered. And he, as her father, hears this news from back across the country in Walla Walla, Washington. Then I can't even imagine. I hope that nobody here has to go through something like that. And I'm not meaning to speak lightly of it in any way if anybody does have a similar experience. But he went through this terrible tragedy. He told this story to us in the context of a pastoring class on dealing with grief and being with people in loss. And when he told the story, he said immediately, when something like that hits you, your world is turned upside down. You don't know how to make heads or tails of anything. You're in shock. He said there is only one thing that anybody did for him that he actually remembers that was meaningful to him, that didn't just get lost in the confusion and everything. There's another professor who teaches pastoral counseling, or used to, he's retired now, used to teach pastoral counseling, a man named Larry Viverka, who, upon hearing of this news, Larry went over to Admiral Bigger's house and sat with him in his living room for 3 hours without saying a single word. And just sat there. He never, from coming in from anything, he didn't offer anything. He didn't say anything. He just sat there and he was with them. And Admiral Bigger, as he told this story, he said, there was a lot of people who did a lot of things that I appreciate. And the church family, the university, everybody was there for us and rose up to be there for us. But there was nobody who did anything as impactful for me as what Larry did. Just to come and sit and be with me. Now for me, as I heard that story, that was a life-changing story for one huge reason. Because going out into ministry and becoming a pastor, I would easily say that the biggest thing that I was personally afraid of was, what do I do when expected to go and meet with somebody who's experiencing loss and grief? Not what do I do? The question I thought in my mind was, what do I say? Have you ever wondered that or thought when you're facing it, going to be with somebody who's gone through something, what is it that you say? You don't want to say the wrong thing. But we also, in a lot of ways, I think, put pressure on ourselves to say the right thing, to have the right words of comfort or the wisdom thing, or to somehow put it in perspective. Especially us pastors can easily feel that pressure to, I've just got to have the right thing that just ties it all together and, puts God in the right view. And there's all this pressure to do that. And when I heard this story, that pressure was released from me because I realized in hearing that I don't have to have I don't have to have anything to say. The most important thing that I can do in this circumstance is just be there. Just presence. The ministry of presence is what I believe author Eugene Peterson referred to it as. That just be in the presence of somebody and offer that. That is hard to do, but it's especially hard to do when you're dealing with people who are upset or are grieving in an area that we don't understand or maybe don't even agree with. I don't know if you have noticed, but our world and country in particular are not getting closer to having people that agree with one another. I don't know if that's the right way to put it. I don't know where anybody is on any end of the spectrum, but I do know that you have to admit, everybody, we recognize that that we're getting more polarized in different areas. That within the same week, and I'll use a little bit of a safer example recently referring to COVID, going to the supermarket, I think it would be possible to both have the feeling of looking at somebody who's wearing a mask and thinking thinking you should be doing that, and I'm proud of you for doing that. We're all trying to protect each other and herd immunity, and like I'm not giving you my germs through my, and you're not giving me yours, kind of a thing. And be proud of that. But also, I know that there are times when I have also felt like almost like pressured not to, like there's a stand that you're taking against being controlled by the government or something if you're not taking it. And I know that I said that was going to be a safe example, and I clearly realize that's not as I talk about it. There are totally different perspectives on that. Obviously, the greater thing that happened kind of going along with this and was even heightened by the fact that we've gone through this COVID is the tension that has happened racially in the country since then with the Black Lives Matter movement and the response to George Floyd's murder and the other things, and Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery and all these different things that have happened that have some people expressing grief openly, loudly, in a way that is hard to ignore, much like Mordecai. And other people at the same time almost expressing and feeling as much upsetness at that upsetness. And at the whys and the how-fors and the political rhetoric that can get attached to these kinds of things. Now, I'm not here to quote another professor who told me something one time that I took as wisdom. When I went to seminary was at the time when, the year when Barack Obama was elected president, I went to seminary. I was in seminary. And during that time, amongst these students in Michigan, is where I did my master's degree in Michigan, amongst the students, there was a good 50-50 split on people who would have cited themselves Democrat versus Republican, or maybe there's some that were a little more independent or not necessarily that. But there was definitely an energy around this election. And when it came to it, and there was a couple students in particular. I remember we had this one class that we taught that was on the subject of creation, basically, origins and things like that. 120 students in this auditorium, small auditorium room, and the teachers were late coming one day. And there are two students I won't name, even though you would no way know who these people are, but two students in particular who were outspoken for either side, who used this as an opportunity. One of them first went down to the front and used it as an opportunity to just really start hammering home his political point of views and the different things, and how we as Christians, how could we be so dumb as to agree with and be on this side over here? It's obvious the side that Jesus is on. He's on our side and really making the speech. Another student comes down to half applause from the room and gets to the other side and starts making kind of the counterpoint. Well, how could you, and going back and forth on this event. The professors finally, it was two co-taught class, the professors finally come in to find this state of things going on, and everyone just kind of smiles and sheepishly laughs and grins and goes back and sits down. And the professors that are standing there, and one of the professors comes forward, and he said again something that stuck with me, and maybe I resonated with a little bit too much because of how much I don't like to offend people. But he made this observation. He said, it's okay to have a political opinion. It's okay to be patriotic. It's okay to believe where you believe and what you believe. Like, that's a fine thing to do. And as ministers, okay to do that. Are you going to vote? I would encourage you to go vote. He said, and this is the next thing he said that the minute as a minister that you identify yourself with one party or the other, you have effectively lost your ability to reach half of the people. As soon as you are in that and it's declared there, you can't do that. Now, there may be some places where you can get away with that a little bit more, that are a little stronger one side or the other where you live. But if you're taking the whole country as a whole, if you're taking the ability to reach everybody, even in places that you would think are predominantly red or blue, you will find red or blue the other side, even in those places. And he made that statement, again, not to say that having a political opinion was bad or anything like that, but it was an awakening statement for me to realize, I wouldn't want for my assuredness in something there to prevent for me from being able to communicate the gospel to somebody. Now, I grew up in a home and in a place, in an environment around, I guess, the arguments and the things that I would hear were definitely more one side of the spectrum. Strongly so. To the point where when I went to college and when I went other places, it was of my belief and mindset that anybody who was not there obviously had to be deceived by the devil, or wasn't a real Christian, or if they were claiming to be. Like, very strongly where I was. Now, since then, I have had a number of different experiences and relationships with different people that have caused me to stop and question some different perspectives. Not to change me and to move me from here over to here. That hasn't happened in my life. But it is easier to have a very strong opinion about something if you do not have a close relationship with somebody who disagrees. And in our country today, my experience, my perspective on what I go through on a regular basis is that it is increasingly easy in our world today to surround yourself with voices that agree with you and to only fight against any dissenting voice, to only listen to the news media that agrees with the position that I already have, to only go on websites and look at the news things that agree with where I'm at, to even Facebook. I have the ability in Facebook, people don't know this, or maybe they do know it, I have the ability in Facebook to almost silence someone without letting them know it, right? Like, you can shun them with, like, just, you don't see the stuff that they post, but don't let them know that you're doing that, right? You can do that with Facebook, so that my Facebook can eventually become a feed of only things that make me feel good and better. Now, again, I am not trying to come at this from either point of view. I am observing from Esther, and I'm going to go back a slide here. I'm observing from Esther that she did something that speaks to me, that I very much am passionate about and wish and hope and want to convey to as many people as I possibly can. I wish that we could recapture this spirit more and more and more in our Christian world and in our country, honestly. And that is the ability to try to understand somebody else. To, rather than just throwing up the defenses and the arguments and the walls and fighting more and more because I disagree with where someone is, to actually try to understand the pain and the things that they're going through. There are bad people on both sides. There are bad arguments. And if all we ever do is lift up the best of my side against the worst of their side, we're going to increasingly see the other people as the enemy. As another, again, to just go quoting all of my favorite professors, but as another professor once said something, one of those things that stuck with me as well. We have, as humans, a tendency to judge your weaknesses based on my strengths, right? We don't lift up the best example of your party against the worst example of my party.
right? We lift up the ideal of what it stands to be, where I believe, against the absolute worst example of what you are. And it keeps us from being able to have those conversations, even if it's things we disagree with, and even if we don't change our minds, like I said, 100%, and go and be like, well, I no longer believe this, I'm just in your camp now. I don't think that's where it is or what we should be striving for either. But it should be, as Christians, I believe, a striving to listen, like the Bereans, and try to understand and come together and hear the pain that people are going through. And right now, this is the reason why this spoke to me so much. Because I personally was stung by the realization, personally, internally, I'm just talking about myself here, but I personally was hit, and it made me question myself to realize that I was more upset by the fact that riots were going on than by the pain that caused the riots. But that made me have to start thinking about myself, that what really was upsetting me was the fact that it seemed like things were unsafe for me. And not realizing that, maybe even though there are some obviously not good motivations and bad things and people even attached to going and doing these types of things, there is undoubtedly a real pain that is the root and cause of doing this. And I have a lot of homework to do in trying to come together with people that I know in the Black community and try to listen and understand them better. And I haven't been doing a good enough job at that. Let's go on here to the next part of this. This is the second part of this, dealing with the pain. Facing the pain, that's a tough thing. Dealing with the pain, though, I think that's, like, you have to face it in order to deal with it, but dealing with the pain is where we're trying to get to. Hathach went out to Mordecai in the open square of the city in front of the king's gate. And Mordecai told him all that had happened to him, and the exact sum of money that Haman had promised to pay into the king's treasury for the destruction of the Jews, which, by the way, Jesus was sold for 30 pieces of silver, right? This was 10,000 pieces of silver. This was a lot of money that was put down to deal with this particular, what was honestly a racial grudge between Haman and the Jews, for the destruction of the Jews. Mordecai also gave him a copy of the written decree issued in Susa for their destruction, that he might show it to Esther and explain it to her, and command her to go to the king to beg his favor and plead with him on behalf of her people. And Hathach went out and told Esther what Mordecai had said. Then Esther spoke to Hathach and commanded him to go to Mordecai and say the following: all the king's servants and the people of the king's provinces know that if any man or woman goes to the king inside the inner court without being called, there is but one law to be put to death, except the one to whom the king holds out the golden scepter, that he may live. But as for me, I have not been called to come to the king these 30 days. Now, dealing with the pain, the first note here, obviously from the story, getting involved could hurt Esther, right? It can cause her pain. In fact, it's at the bottom of the page here, and it's going to squeeze in here, but I put this quotation here out of commentary that I was reading. She, being Esther, cannot plead for the Jews as her people without being subject to their fate, as decreed in the Edict of Haman, right? There's a level to which facing this and actually dealing with it puts her at severe risk, because she cannot go and say, hey, king, by the way, even if she gets past the golden scepter, even if she has the favor there, for her to be able to approach the king and say, king, there is this decree out there that has happened, you know of it, to destroy all the Jews. She cannot bring this forward without the inevitable inquiry at least coming back, or why does this matter to you, Esther? Or Mordecai, who is a Jew, he's your uncle? In order for her to voice something in it, she is going to be implicated in deserving the same fate. That is the reality that she faces if she is going to go forward. Which the only thing I put there, the reason for that getting involved could hurt Esther, or because or with this quotation here, is just the reality that it is difficult. It's difficult to enter into people's pain with them. Now step away, if we can, from the greater tense political situations and all that conversation and whatnot, and just approach this and look at this as any kind of pain we're dealing with, any suffering, anything that people have gone through that is weighing them down, that hurts, there is a transaction that happens naturally. If I'm actually going to be there for you, it is going to come at a cost. It always comes at a cost. Emotionally, it comes at a cost to actually be there and to try to understand. And it takes courage. Esther's courage to go before the king, to face the golden scepter, which is, I mentioned last week, is one of the places and the ways that I see God's hand in this story, is the fact that she had that courage to go forward. It takes courage to enter into there and a willingness to go there empathetically and experience the pain that somebody else is going through. And I'm just encouraged by her recognizing this, first off, that this is going to come at a cost for her personally to enter into. Finishing off this bit of the story, and they told Mordecai what Esther had said. Then Mordecai, this is the part that I find most fascinating, honestly, of all the places, and the reason why I even decided to preach on chapter 4 was in these verses right here. Mordecai told them to reply to Esther, "Do not think to yourself that in the king's palace you will escape more than any of the other Jews." Esther's temptation, and this is the slide that I told you, if there's one that I wanted to edit or take or change or something like that. It was this one, but I'll read it and get into it anyway. Esther's temptation was to assume that she was personally beyond the reach of persecution. I don't know that I necessarily agree with that as much as I did 2 days ago. I think she knew that, and that was the motivation. I mean, she knew that to identify and get in there would put her in the same boat. But maybe it was somewhat of a temptation for her, and obviously was, to just remain in a place of denial because of how much it was going to cost her. And honestly, for her, it was okay. And as long as she didn't get announced as a Jew, she was going to be okay. Mordecai faces her with this reality, though, of don't think to yourself that in the king's palace you will escape more than any of the other Jews. For if you keep silent at this time, and this is the verse, this is fascinating to me. If you keep silent at this time, relief and deliverance will rise for the Jews from another place, but you and your father's house will perish. And who knows? This is the money verse. This is the one that, if any encouraging billboard or poster is going to be made on the book of Esther, it's this one right here. Whether you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this. Now, this last one here, this is a confusing statement, and I'll probably go back a couple slides to examine it again. But Esther was both needed and not needed. And this is where it all ties into what originally the seed of an idea for this sermon came from, was this idea that my story matters, that Esther's story matters, because I was struck by this. Because coming into the book of Esther, I'm going back here, if I can deliver right here, this part. Coming into the story of Esther, this is the verse that stood out to me. This is the one that I was thinking to myself, yes, my story matters, because who knows if you've come to the kingdom for such a time as this. It's a very encouraging message that I think any of the challenges and difficulties and awful things that we're facing, and let's be honest, nobody asks to live in the time and face the difficulties that they face. We're just here. And God has placed us here, and this is the encouraging message there. And another one of those places where you see God kind of in the subtext, right? Who knows whether God has placed you here in the kingdom for such a time as this. But this verse comes immediately, or this is the second half of a verse that begins with, "For if you keep silent at this time, relief and deliverance will rise from the Jews from another place." In other words, Esther seems to be, at least from Mordecai's perspective, she's being told, God can use you. This is amazing. This is an amazing opportunity, and look what God has done to put you in the place to be used. But if you choose not to be used by God in this way at this time right now, God will find another way. Like, you're needed, but you're not needed, right? You can step up and you can be part of this story. Your story matters. Your contribution matters. What you have the opportunity to do matters right now. But yet, at the same time, this is what he's saying, deliverance from the Jews can come from another place besides you. This is actually an incredible statement of faith by Mordecai in believing that salvation can rise in another way than even the specific way that God seems to have arranged things to be able to rise in that time. I mean, it clearly looks like, and we know from the story, that God is going to use Esther, and he's made her for this purpose. But she still has a choice to make of whether or not she wants to, and the fate of the universe does not rest on her. God can find another way to make this happen. Honestly, I don't know what to do with that. I don't know how to even take that away personally, or how to process that, because it almost seems like this combination of messages coming at me. But I do believe that there is something there. There's something to this idea that God has a purpose for my life. He wishes and wants me to be a person who steps up and tries to understand and helps everybody, any child of God who is in need, especially those who don't have a voice. That he wants me to be able to use what he has given me to help, right? But he does not force me to, and the reality is that if I do not choose to engage and step in, he'll find someone else who's going to. He's going to find some other way to do that. It is oddly comforting and encouraging me to recognize that, yes, my story matters and I'm invited into this process, but also the fate of the universe does not rest on my shoulders. I'm not the Messiah. I'm not the one that it all comes down to, ultimately. So it puts a perspective of choice on me of, to what degree do I want to enter in? Again, step back. I know because I opened it, maybe that's all that's on the table, but step back from the political things even. And just the pain of another human being. The suffering of another human being, which we believe God has sent us to fulfill the Great Commission, as I'm seeing all these posters around here, right? To go bring good news and hope and goodness to people who are in darkness and who need that. It comes at a cost, though, right? It comes at a cost to us to enter in, to try to understand people and listen to the pain that they're in order to be in a perspective where we can be used to bring goodness and life and healing and hope into a person's life who is suffering. If I go to the king, it's the last slide. If I go to the king, though it is against the law, she says, then I will go to the king, though it is against the law. And if I perish, I perish. And Esther's story ends here, this part of the Esther story, I should say, this chapter 4, ends with this reminder of what I think of as actually more of a New Testament perspective of reality of things that Jesus pulled on in Matthew when he said that whoever seeks to find his life will lose it, and the one who denies their life will find it. That she's the hope, her own life and the life of her nation, the people that she is fighting for, depends upon her willingness to lay her life down if that's what it takes. And so she takes this courage to go forward and approach, and we know how the story goes from there. It's not over, but there is this here. Chapter 4 is I believe, the emotional pinnacle of the book of Esther, because it isn't the battle. There's more that has to happen. She has to stay close to the Spirit of God and listen to those promptings, and the different things unfold with the plans of Haman and all those kinds of things. It all goes from there. But this is where she faced it. This is where she made that decision to be willing to do the thing that was uncomfortable for her, but that needed to be done in order to try to understand people's pain and to fight for them and to fight for their survival. Let's pray. Close up here, Jesus. Thank you again for how you've spoken to me through this and challenged me. There's a lot of elements to this and a lot of different parts, and I know that you have had a hand perpetually in my life, and you're guiding me with this. I pray that anything that was cast here today through this would be of help to somebody, that your Spirit would filter out maybe where it could be harmful instead of helpful, and just allow something good to happen in everybody's life to pull us closer to you and to pull us closer to where you want us to be. Thank you for this time that we can spend together, Jesus. And may you continue to be our Savior and the one who leads us through and fights for us and enters into our pain, unafraid to come in and suffer with us and to understand us, as ridiculous as we are and can be. Thank you for setting this example for us, and thank you for the encouragement that you've shown us through Esther. In your name I pray. Amen.
There's revival, and it's spreading like a wildfire in my heart. Sunday morning, hallelujah, and it's lasting all week long. Can you hear it? Can you feel it? It's the rhythm of a gospel song. Oh, once you choose it, you can lose it. There ain't nothing gonna steal my joy. I got an old church choir singing in my soul. I got a sweet salvation and it's beautiful. I got a heart overflowing 'cause I've been restored. There ain't nothing gonna steal my joy. No, there ain't nothing gonna steal my joy. When the valleys that I wander turn to mountains that I can't climb. Oh, you are with me, you never leave me. Oh, 'cause there ain't nothing gonna steal my joy. I got an old church choir singing in my soul. I got a sweet salvation and it's beautiful. I got a heart overflowing 'cause I've been restored. There ain't nothing gonna steal my joy. No, there ain't nothing gonna steal my joy. Clap your hands and stop competing. Find that gospel 'cause it's all you'll ever need. All you'll ever need. Clap your hands and stop competing. Find that gospel 'cause it's all you'll ever need. All you'll ever need. I got an old church choir singing in my soul. I got a sweet salvation and it's beautiful. I got an old church choir singing in my soul. I got a sweet salvation and it's beautiful. I got a heart overflowing 'cause I've been restored. No, there ain't nothing gonna steal my joy. No, there ain't nothing gonna steal my joy. Oh, there ain't nothing gonna steal my joy.
Yes! Woo! Thank you. Have a great week. Love it.
Like Lee said, we're hoping that you'll stay for just a little bit so we can say farewell to the ops. And we wanted to say that some of you were very kind to make a little musical contribution, and Roland's going to be saying a little bit more, but we're trying to get this musical contribution playing here in just a moment. But if you can't get it playing,
He's really, that's where you go.
Hallelujah, praise ye the Lord. Praise ye the Lord, hallelujah. Praise ye the Lord, hallelujah. Praise ye the Lord, hallelujah. Praise ye the Lord. Praise, what's that? It's a yippee yahoo, way to go, God. Praise, what's that? It's a yippee yahoo, way to go, God.
Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Hallelujah, hallelujah, praise the Lord. Praise the Lord, hallelujah, praise
everybody.
Yeah, thank you, guys.
Okay, we really appreciated your work with music and with the kids, and the kids put together some cards for you.
Aww.
And there's another card that just want to pray for you now as you leave. God will.
We've shared this with a few people, but honestly, like, both Josh and I have really struggled finding a church that, like, speaks to our soul. And so, I'm gonna get emotional, but, the Bridge has really, like, changed our lives in that way. Like, it's not just going to church, it helped us both find that true relationship with God. And you guys are such a big part of that. So, like, you guys will always have such a big place in our hearts just because, like, without you guys, I don't know, we would be in such a different place in our relationships and, like, with each other and with God, and even just, like, it goes from that, oh, we should get up and go to church in the morning, where, like, Sundays are exciting because you get to see your church family and you get to worship with some of your favorite people. And so you guys have really brought a lot to our lives, and it's hard leaving to go to a new church, but I appreciate you all so much and know that you've left a really lasting impact with us. So thank you.
And we thank you too for the impact that you've had on our lives.
Thanks for letting me share my music with you. We are leaving, but we won't, I don't think, be gone for good. I mean, we're not going to Germany or, to another country or anything. But for those of you who don't know, I got an opportunity to be a graduate assistant for the strings at Northern State University. So that's kind of the opportunity that was presented for me, that I think the direction God wanted us to go. And thankfully, my wife's been very understanding and very appreciative and supportive in my endeavors there. So that's the direction we're taking. But this is definitely the hardest part about leaving this town is you guys, and we've really appreciated the environment that you've cultivated here and how you made us feel a part of everything that goes on. So thank you very much.
Okay, let's pray. Father, thank you so much for bringing Josh and Natasha to us. Thank you for the chance we had to get to know them, and for the way that they have ministered to our lives. And Father, we thank you for the plans you have for their future. We know that the plans that you have for them are good plans. We know that you're going to use them mightily where you take them. And just pray that they would continue to look to you daily for your direction, and that they, like Esther, would be used where they are for the time that you have given them there. Thank you, Father, in Jesus' name. So as Lee said, there are cupcakes that I'd like to share with all of you.
Are they in the snack? I think they're in the snack room, right?